Use our learning outcome about understanding and applying qualitative data collection principles and evaluating your data collection skills. This is a lot of what we're going to talk about in this lecture is about you being able to evaluate your data collection skills. So let's talk a little bit about interviewing. I actually think it's a really difficult skill. So this is a bit of a joke, the idea that it's as easy as doing all of the following things. So of course you actually have to be listening. You have to be listening to what the person is actually saying to you and remembering all of the different things they've said throughout the whole interview. You need to be alert to connections and contradictions, and that means noticing patterns across the interview, so issues that are coming up again and that you might want to probe or follow up on. Noticing contradictions that the participant might be making, not to trip them up about them, but to gently explore what are the differences, why is something different in different situations. And while you're doing that, you're planning your next question. So noticing what the participant has just told you or what they've told you throughout the rest of the interview and how that might change what you're going to say next. So trying to be responsive to what the person is saying. And that means not just saying exactly what the next question is on the schedule. So that might be amending the next question or not asking it at all because the participant is already talking about the issue. We're also, while we're doing that, monitoring the whole interview schedule and making sure that we're covering the topics that we know we need to in order to get the right data to answer our research question. Some things we might need to not ask about, and some things we might need to go back to if we feel we haven't explored something enough. And it's okay to say to a participant, look, we've covered quite a lot of content. I'm just going to take a moment to look at my interview schedule to make sure that we've covered everything that's important. So while we're doing all of that work, being in the moment, as well as a part of our brain is kind of standing back and looking across the whole interview and standing slightly distant from the interaction, we're also monitoring the person's body language and their tone. Are they comfortable? Are they getting upset? Are they starting to look bored or irritated by the questions? Sometimes professional people that we're interviewing about their professional job might be conscious of time and keen to move on with things. So really noticing what's happening for the participant and keeping an eye, of course, on time, because we've said to them this interview will take half an hour and we're only halfway through the questions that we want to ask and we've already hit the 30-minute mark. Then we need to do something quickly about that. And while we do that, all of those things that are happening in our head, we have to look like we're in the moment with the participant, that we're giving them our full attention. So there's a lot to do here, and I often think it's useful to think about that for this in terms of for those of you who may have learned how to drive a car, just remembering how that was really hard work in the beginning, remembering about having to do all the things in terms of operating the car, everything that was happening inside the car, and then having to pay attention to the traffic and the road and what was happening up ahead. So what we're going to do in this lecture is give you some idea about the kinds of things that you can do that might help people talk about relevant things while at the same time relieve you a little bit of having to think too hard about things. So of course our job is to encourage people to talk, but not just about anything. We want to know about the things that we're interested in. So remembering that the data in qualitative research is generated through an interaction between a researcher and a participant or a group of participants. So in this case, we're talking with one person. So everything that comes out is going to be out of that interaction between the two of us. So what that means is that it actually matters a great deal whether or not I'm any good at my job. So I can be a terrible researcher but have a really good survey that I've gotten from someone else and I'll get good data. But if I'm a terrible interviewer, I'm probably going to get terrible interview data. So we really need to pay attention to that. And so some of this is about creating a safe space to make a participant feel at ease. We want to seem calm, so we don't want to be flustered and coming into the interview late and dropping our bags and complaining about the traffic. We want to appear professional, so that we look like we know what we're doing, so we've got our recording equipment and we know how to use it, and we're not panicking about whether it's recording or not. We've got our questions and everything. It's not scraps of paper, so it looks like we're in control. We want to be trustworthy, so make the participant feel like what they're telling us is important and it matters, and we're listening, and we're not going to break confidences. So we're not saying to them, oh, you'll never guess the person I interviewed yesterday, oh, what a ridiculous story they told me, and making fun of them. I mean, it's in some ways all of those things are really obvious, but it's worth paying attention to. We also want to be respectful of our participants' world and where they're coming from, and that means adapting to them. So not correcting their language if they're using slang about health conditions or particular behaviours, not correcting them by using technical terms, so trying to meet them where they are. I think being curious is perhaps the most important characteristic or thing to go into an interview with. We have to actually be genuinely interested to kind of wonder about what's gone on in someone's life and why they think the way that they do. And I think that participants can really feel that curiosity or lack of curiosity. So if you're bored and this feels like just going through the motions, people feel it. Okay, so let's start talking about the specific skills that we can use to make sure we're encouraging people to talk about the things that we want to know about. So the first and perhaps most obvious one, of course, is listening. So this means really hearing what the participant is saying, not just the words, but the kinds of things, the meaning of those words and what the person is talking about. And then responding to that by tailoring our next question. So not simply asking the next question on our interview schedule when somebody gives us an answer. And I see this sometimes in transcripts where people get an answer and they just move straight on to the next question. But really listening to think about, is there more to explore here? And then asking a responsive follow-up question. This is a slide that I've borrowed from a colleague, David Brockman. David is an Indigenous general practitioner and researcher, and we were training Aboriginal young men to do interviews, and he put this slide up, and I think it's a really awesome way of thinking about what listening means in an interview. So there's two things. Firstly, attention, and this is about really keeping your attention in the moment with this participant in this interview. This moment will never come again, and so we need to make sure that this is where our attention is and not somewhere outside. At this moment, the participant is the most important person in the world. It's not our partner who's going to be annoyed because we're running late. It's not our supervisor who's nagging us because we're behind on our interviews. And it's not me, the interviewer. It's this person who has given up their time to tell us about their experiences. And really paying attention is not the same as he described it as a cat watching a mouse hole to make sure that they don't miss the mouse when it comes out of the mouse hole. So you're not kind of like all of your attention is focused and your eyes never move from the participant. We have to be respectful about giving people space. And also awareness is really important when we're trying to really listen to people, and that's about being aware of what kinds of things we bring to a situation. And that might be transient things like we're a bit stressed at the moment, or we had a difficult morning getting the family out of the house, or we had a row with our mother on the phone, or whatever the things that might have happened that might make me in this moment feel a bit stressed. Or there might be bigger things about our values and our beliefs and our expectations about how people behave in the world. And that those kinds of things, so having that self-awareness of the things that I bring into this situation and how they may impact on how I respond to the participant. So that might mean I ask questions that sound a bit judgmental or critical, or that my face might react in ways that suggest I don't think that was a great thing for the participant to do when they're telling me a story, or that I act shocked. So really noticing about how I am and how I might impact on the participant. And that's also being aware of the fact that this interview might be the first time someone has talked about these issues, and so we really need to be aware of that. That we might open up a whole bunch of things, so someone might be telling us about something and they might suddenly realize or see their behavior or somebody else's behavior in a different light. So that all of those things will have potentially have an impact on a participant, so we have to be aware of that. Another skill that's really important, a strategy that we can use in interviews, is we've asked a set question from our interview schedule and we've gotten an answer from the person. So the next thing that I would expect somebody to do is to use some probes or focused questions as a follow-up to encourage the participant to talk more or explore the thing that they've just told me about. So giving people a chance to provide more detailed explanations or more of a story, and really trying to understand the meaning that people something had for somebody, or their reasons or their understanding about why a situation happened. So here's some examples of that. So we've asked someone a question and they've given us an answer, and then we can follow up with, what effect did that have on you? Or what was behind that, do you think? Or what kinds of things did she do that made you feel supported? Or what makes you say that? So there's lots of these kinds of things that you can, probes that you can use, and I think it's really useful to practice saying these things out loud so you don't feel silly when you're saying them. And even think in advance about what might be some probes that you could kind of keep in your mind that you could use, and you could even write these down on a piece of paper. Another type of probe is something called clarifying, and this is again a follow-up question that just checks our understanding or finds out more specifically what somebody means. So some examples of that was somebody said, oh, that was a really special day for us. So you could say, what was special about that? So it's getting them to clarify the particular meaning of special. Or somebody says something you're not quite sure what they mean, you can say, could you explain what you mean by that? Or somebody's talking about something and you realize there's a fact that you don't have that would be helpful. So can you remind me when your treatment finished? Or what age were you when that happened? Or can you remind me again how many people were there when that particular incident was occurring? So this is about just checking terms, details, timings, that kinds of thing. We can use probing and clarifying together to test inconsistencies or contradictions in a participant's story that they're telling us. And this is not like I'm a detective and I'm trying to trip somebody up or catch them out in a lie. This is about trying to understand about and explore those contradictions. So why was behavior okay in one situation but not in another situation? Or why did they behave one way and then another way? What were the conditions that made that possible? So really trying to understand about how context might have impacted on a phenomenon. So you could say something like, earlier you said that X, so that was fine then, and this situation it sounds like you weren't happy with how the doctor behaved. Can you talk a little bit about what's different there? So this just gentle, not trying to point out to somebody that they've contradicted themselves, but just trying to understand about how those two situations are different. And then we have a skill called orienting to the specific, and this is really important in qualitative research. So this is about trying to shift people away from talking in the abstract or generalities or hypotheticals. That's not really helpful. What we want to know is concrete things. So what happened in a particular situation with particular patients or colleagues or friends or whoever. So trying to get people to give us contextual knowledge. So we don't want speculation or opinion, we want descriptions of real things that happened and to understand people's experiences in that way. So these are follow-up questions that help a participant to get to those relevant specifics. So some examples that you might use, someone is telling you about something and you say, can you give me an example of that? Or can you tell me about the last time that you did that? So this is the difference between, say, somebody saying, oh yeah, and when I exercise I usually, which, as we all know, covers a whole multitude of things. So getting them to tell me about the last time that you exercised. How did that go?